Okay, guys. Okay, let's settle now. Oh boy. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna have the exam the first week of December, right? So which means we're not gonna cover all the chapters. So today we will see. Today, Wednesday, we will look at the African food and culture, and the disease that we will look at today is high blood pressure, right? And also obesity, even though I don't really consider obesity as a disease, right? But if you remember the picture, central to obesity give us the ramification with all the other diseases. Okay, so hopefully we can finish this chapter by Wednesday. So everybody has the PPT. You got all the PPT. All right. So oftentimes when we talk about Africa, it's sometimes sorry. It's sometimes very challenging, right? It's sometimes very challenging when we talk about Africa because it's actually very huge, and this is the second largest continent after Asia. It's also the second largest in population, right? I think in Asia it's over 4 billion people, and in Africa it's reaching a little bit over a billion people. So as you can see on the map, we have the north from the south, the east from the west, and the people living in Africa are all different, right? So it's difficult to talk about typical African food and culture. So we look at some region a little bit, and the second part of the class, this is when we will be talking about the health of Africans, abroad, because remember that the key element that we study this semester is acculturation and health. All right. So this will be the last, hopefully the last chapter that we're going to cover on acculturation and health. And the last chapter will be on planning a healthy diet, because all this time we have been studying about the problem of health with immigrants, okay? And then we then have to come with a solution. So for those who took the nutrition class, you already know how can we plan like a healthy diet. All right. So like I told you, is the largest continent that we have in the world with over 1 billion population. And in terms of the family values, extended family is important. Unlike in the West, where basically you have your mom, your dad, your brothers and sisters. In Africa, generally, extended family is part of the whole family. All right. Words, for example, like cousins, for example, some of these words are non-existent. Everybody is just like a brother. Like even though it's your uncle's child, the person is actually your brother or your sister. Okay, so the extended family is actually very important, and the African family is really mostly ruled by men, if you want. Okay, so the parts that we would like to look at first is which one? The traditional health beliefs. If you remember the chapter that we cover, what did we say when we look at food and religions? We look at the different parts of the world. What we found out is that illness in the African view is caused by what? Yes, it's caused by natural forces, social forces, and supernatural forces. So everything seems to have everything seems to have a reason, all right? Everything seems to have a reason. And we also mentioned some other practices that exist if you look at the other chapters, like we talk about some spiritual elements, like the voodoo and things like that. Prayer is a very important part in the African culture when you look at the health system belief here. All right, so these parts were really revisions. If you go to the other PPTs, we already looked at those elements, right? Like I said, I just give you like the overview, and then we focus on the health of the African people abroad, and we look at some staple foods as well. All right. For natural prescriptions, the healer will use what? Some type of bleeding, massage, and chant. I don't know how many African people you met so far. It's all different. For example, you will see some people part of the west of Africa. If you look at their face, you may see some people with some marks here. That's been like on the face here or on the arms. These are the parts where I refer to some bleeding. It can be something like protection. All right? Oh, you're looking at me? I have nothing. So, it's all different depending on where you're coming from and your belief system. For example, somebody is going abroad, a lot of prayers will be made for that person, for the protection of that person. Some singing, some massages, and some type of shower, special shower that you have to take when you're going abroad for the spirit, the ancestors to protect you. This is why you will see some people maybe wearing some specific protection things on their arms, or having some type of marks on their face or on their body. So these are practices that you will see most commonly in the west part of Africa. All right, and practices, for example, like voodoo, it's actually present there, and it's not a surprise. Even when we talk about religions, it's not a surprise if you meet an African who's at the same time, he's a Christian, he goes to church, but at the same time, he also has other ancestral practices, right? So, oftentimes, it's possible that they will be using that. Also, some magic powders. People will have some magic powders, they believe in that, and you have that magic powder that you have in your room that is supposed to protect you, or if you need chances in your life in order to succeed. These are just like a general aspect of it. But as you know, Africa, like Korea, is changing a lot. And how do we change? Because the key word is the change, right? We change. How do we change? We change in contact with other people, all right? We change in contact with other people. And for example, if you talk about the food, because it's our main interest, so the African diet is also in transition and has changed also a lot. For example, if you mention the part of East Africa, you have a lot of people from the Arab countries who came there, right? A lot of people from Asia as well, and a lot of people from India, as well as people from England. So when these people come to Africa, how do they come? They come with their culture, right? They come with their dietary habits, right? So a lot of food being introduced to Africa as well, and they became today staple foods of these places. Okay, we will look at some of them. On your PPT, I give an example of East Africa, but I will give you some extra notes today, where I divided Africa basically north, south, east, and west, to really see that depending where you go in Africa, the culture will be a little bit different. Okay. So, for example, here I put in the north. Anybody has an idea what it is? What kind of food is it?
Rice.
No, it's not actually rice. Anybody knows this food? Did you ever try it? What is it? This is couscous, right? Did you ever try couscous before? Who tried couscous here before? You tried couscous, right? Maybe the contact with a lot of people from North Africa. Couscous here, for couscous. So this is so we're looking at North Africa. So this is a staple food. This is a staple food in the north part of Africa. Okay. By the way, those who go to my YouTube page, I have a recipe with couscous that we call couscous royal. Did you look at it? Yeah, so you can check it out. You know, I had to learn that that recipe. So this is a staple food that's very popular in north part of Africa, mostly in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. So that north part, this is the staple food that you're gonna find there. Okay, very popular there, along with olive oil. You know, the olive oil is actually pretty much present in that place. So I'm looking at the north part of Africa. So the Arab people, the Arab introduced, right, that food in that region. And now that region, couscous is now just part of their dietary habit, part of their food habit. All right. So this is just a byproduct of semolina that been later on transformed into couscous later on. All right. Some of my friends, for example, in a certain part of Africa, they never tried this one. All right. How about you guys? How did you try couscous? Do you have friends from north part of Africa in France? Just in a restaurant?
In a restaurant.
Yeah.
Many places.
Oh, you see it on the marketplace in France, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, France is kind of a multicultural country as well. You have a lot of immigrants coming to France. And as they come to France, they come with their food habits as well, right? And you have different markets as well. I think in the East Gate here too, you have like a Pakistani store where you have, they bring products from their country, all right? So let's just remember this one. Like I said, check my YouTube page. If you want to try couscous and learn how to make it, you have an opportunity to try that food. It's actually pretty nice, right? It's actually pretty nice. So now, if you look at the south, south and east part of Africa. So the staple food there is a little bit different as well. Like I said, that part of Africa, you have, the presence of Arab who came, and also at one point of time, a lot of people from India who came there to work. And as they came with their spices, they came with their food, all right? And with that mixture, you have like a very popular maize there. The staple food there is called ugali. You have the east part of Africa, countries like we're talking about Kenya, Tanzania, we call it a bit part in the south here. I have a picture for you here. Here you have the ugali. And the other popular one that you have is what? Is chapati. If you look at the chapati one, looks like Indian food, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So these are staple foods that you actually find there. So if you meet some African people coming from the east part, they will be eating Korean food, but at one point of time, if they have a party, they will all get excited over ugali or over chapati. All right. So I also have a recipe making ugali. You can check that on YouTube as well. I've been trying food from all over the world. All right. I also have one Korean recipe, I think. You can check it out. So try to try all these foods from all over the world. I think in this gate we have 2 Indian restaurants now. Did you try them? 2 Indian restaurants by Eastgate. You don't know them? Try them. Try different kind of food. And Mohammed, maybe you know chapati. It's close to your culture, isn't it? Yeah. So and these are staple foods that people will use. For example, like the bread in Ireland. All right. But it comes from different regions of the world, and as people are acculturate in that place, they exchange. Remember, acculturation is what we are adapting. There's something that is happening. There's an exchange of culture, and as people move on, it just becomes part of the dietary habits. Okay. So in the West. The west side of Africa, the staple food is called fufu, some type of mix of yam, and countries like, for example, Nigeria, really known for it, if you go to some African countries. But when I talk about the difference is, this food, for example, fufu, is not popular, for example, if you go to Kenya or if you go to South Africa. Okay? So we cannot really look at Africa as a whole. Alright? Depending on where you go, they will be presenting to you, right? They will be presenting you with different kind of staple food. The staple food in Korea is what? Rice. Right? So I'm showing to you like different staple foods in these different countries that if you have the opportunity to visit, you may ask for it and try it. It's pretty heavy, and the reason I talk about this, because we will be mentioning acculturation and health, because when now these Africans, why now they move in the West, when they leave Africa to go to these different countries, they may not have access to this food. And then we look at how is the food habit affecting their health. All right? Okay, so the next one is really, anybody knows what it is? How do you call this? Banana. There's another name for this. Anybody? How do you call this one? Now in Central Africa is the place where I was born, in Gabon. The central part of Africa, easy to find. You just follow the equator line, is the first country you meet when you enter Africa, right? Beautiful beaches. I hope you visit there one day, right? The staple food there is, how do we call this? This is a plantain. All right? So it starts all greenish, right? And then it turns into yellow. And and here you have the fried plantain. I also have a recipe for this one. You can check it on YouTube. Are you laughing? Yeah, I like cooking. All right. So you can check that one too. So, but the plantain has to be like really soft, right? It gotta be ripped. And at one point of time, when it's really soft, then you can fry it. It's delicious. I miss plantain very much. If you want to be my best friend forever, bring me some, and we'll be friends for life. Okay? So now in Korea, I didn't talk much about the drinks, right? I think in Korea you have how do you call it? Makgeolli. Makgeolli. You look so excited to talk about this, right? So in that central part of Africa, we are what we call the palm wine. Alright? This is a palm, you know the palm tree? You guys know the palm tree, right? I mean, not the one in Jeju though, it's kind of the real palm tree. Alright? So, you see somebody is going like up there, and I don't know if you're able to see, and you have like all this liquid that is coming from. When it comes out, it's actually sweet. is actually sweet at first, and then they will put some type of different woods inside. It will start the fermentation process that will transform the element into alcohol. All right? Okay, I only drink the sweet part. The sweet part is all natural, and now it looks like this one if you go to some stores. So next time you visit, give me a call, and I will tell you where to go to get this one. There are also other type of wine that have been made based on the sugar cane. You know sugar cane? How do you call it?
It's a sugar baby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So from that one too, when we get like the liquid, also go through a fermentation process, right? The fermentation process also transforms things into alcohol. So I always say that to you guys in nutrition, before you actually start your job, take a month break and travel the world, go away from Asia and go to Gabon, the best country in Africa. Trust me on that one. Okay. So now, in general, historically speaking, there are like kind of two different lives: the life in the city when you live in Africa, and the rural place. And if you go to the rural place where the culture is actually still present, all right, most people will eat like twice a day. In the morning before they go to plantations and work, and then sometimes late at night. Okay, so that's basically the way things work. And a little bit like in Korea, men will eat first, then the boys, the girls, and then the woman will kind of eat last. Women are always, we'll say the mothers, they provide, they think about themselves last, and they have the conscience of feeding the family, all right? So they tend to often eat last, but everybody must be eating together. So if you go to some places in Africa, for example, in my friends from Senegal, they still do that. People sometimes eat together in the same plate, just like a kind of big plate, and everybody is kind of eating there to create the communion there. All right. So when we study the Islamic faith, if you remember, we talk about how important sharing the food is, and I also told you that sometimes it's difficult to make a difference between food and religion, because in Africa, this is something that is part of the African culture, really sharing the food. And don't be surprised, sometimes if you go to some villages, it's possible that people, before they eat, they will take a bit of the food, they will throw it away, or the drink, they will pour it out, give it to the ancestors, right? Another way to honor those who came before us. Okay, now when we talk about Africans, the challenge is often to talk sometimes about race, because in Africa we don't only have what we will call black people, right? In the south part of Africa we have Caucasians, we have the Arabic in the north. But the question that comes to mind is, how then do we relate, for example, with African Americans, the black people, for example, who live in the US. And they also, over time, as you know, when assimilated into the society, you remember the word assimilation on the acculturation plant there. And they also develop some, belief system that are proper to themselves, all right? So I will just look at a little bit of some of the things that African Americans believe when we meet African Americans, and some of the things that they may be referring to. For example, we talk about high blood. If you hear somebody talking about high blood, it's not high blood pressure. Okay, okay. So these are just some realities that we have that sometimes it can be confused with high blood pressure. But here, high blood means that from eating too much rich food, sweet or red food. Okay, this is what we call high blood. Okay, so very important to remember. I know that today when we look at high blood pressure, but here high blood means what? This is from for eating too much rich food, sweet or red food. Okay? And the risk factor, when I mention it, when we talk, for example, about black people, it's important to mention it, especially when we talk about cardiovascular risk factors. One of them being high blood pressure, that we will look at it. We will look at today. I think a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned to you that when we compare with other population, the black community seems to have a higher level, especially for women, a higher level of hypertension compared to other population. Remember that. Do you remember one of the risk factors? Non-modifiable risk factor for cardiovascular disease was what? Race, right? So it's something that we have to take in consideration as well, right? When we're treating some populations. Okay. So and when we mention high blood, we also mention thin blood. Thin blood means what? Can't nourish the body. You should have it on your PPT. So these are just some of the common language that we may encounter, referring to bad blood and unclean blood, referring to impurities collected over the winter months and things of that nature. Okay. All right. So, like any other, person in the world, we often talk about the therapeutic use of food. There is a special field on it when we talk about medicinal food. For example, the yellow root tea allegedly can be used to cure stomachache, fever, and treat diabetes. Peppermint candies actually are supposed to be helping for problem with diabetes. So the question is, we look at it and we say, okay, we use yellow tea to cure stomachache, right? Stomach pain. Peppermint tea for problem related to diabetes. Now, the question, if you remember, that we will ask is, which medicine can verify this claim? Which medicine can verify this claim? Biomedicine. Okay? Okay, guys, don't just study, don't just think everything you study before is over, right? So we say, okay, yellow root tea is used for stomach egg, right? But we must be able to verify these claims, okay? Like for example, we talk about this African culture, they will be using some different plants to cure some elements, and then we need to be able to verify what we are doing. And biomedicine is the medicine that will enable us to verify this claim. Like we have raw onions to break a fever, okay? We have chicoine with sugar to cure intestinal worms. So these are the things that only biomedicine can verify, but the elements of the African and African American culture, all right? To some extent, even when we talk about all the black people that were moved to the US through slavery or to Haiti, some practices are still present, like for example the voodoo in Haiti. So some of these people after over 400 years are still practicing it. All right. So like I said, I cannot really go in details into the African food and culture. Really, truly depends on the region that we're looking at, and then we can go into details about some of those things. But the second part that we want to look at is the health of those, for example, who move away from Africa and now they live, for example, in Korea, or they live in the US or in the West, and what is the status of their health. And one element that we tend to often encounter is the problem of weight and the problem of high blood pressure. So this is something that we know, is that 39%, right, of black men seems to be overweight, and 51% of black women seems to be overweight. We may ask why or what is happening. When we talk, for example, about body image, all right? Body image is a very important element, because depending on your culture, you will see that people will actually prefer women who are overweight, right? Black men will prefer women who are overweight compared to women that are slender, right? It's not a cultural trait. If you go to Africa, it is the same, okay? So that preference can justify why we just see that, oh, okay, black woman seems to be overweight compared to the general population. So it's a body image that is actually preferred in the society. All right. Of course, over time, we've been studying the problem of obesity and the application with health. And today we look at obesity, of course, and the problem of high blood pressure. So keep this one in mind. I talk about what? I talk about body image. And in body image, what did I say? I said, okay, it's a preference of that race, okay? Being a little bit bigger, it's a preference of the black community, all right? Now we just say, okay, is there a repercussion being overweight with the problem of hypertension, all right? What is one of the modifiable factors for cardiovascular disease? What did we say? One of the modifiable factors is what? Yeah, overweight or obesity. So now we know, for example, in the US that if we talk, for example, about black women, their level of high blood pressure seems to be higher than the rest of the population. So then, maybe we are not so surprised, because it's the way that we have, it's something that is acceptable in the community. However, this is something that we have to be very careful with. How did we measure? Do you remember how did we classify obesity? We classify it based on what? Body mass index, right? So the formula, sorry, I think I got a flu since last weekend, so the formula that is used is the formula for everybody, right? So what do? Okay, we take what? The weight of the person and we divide by the height, okay? And then what do we say? We say that if you are over 30, yeah, kilogram per square meter, okay, here it's classified as obesity. All right? Now, this is the interesting part. Is that we also found out that actually you can have a Caucasian woman, okay, and a black woman with the same body mass index, all right? But when you look at it, because we have now more measure, we can take the skin out from the belly side and really measure the fat tissue. We just realized that actually the Caucasian woman has more fat tissue, has more fat in her than the black lady, even though the body mass index seems to be a little bit higher. All right? And in the nutrition classes, we go more in details into it for those who will take it in the next semester, when we talk about body composition. Because of the body composition in Korea today, the classification for BMI for Asians is different. Okay? In Korea, for example, if you are Asian, your capacity to accumulate fat seems to be a little bit more present. So here, overweight as an Asian person in Korea, will say the World Health Organization, the classification for overweight is what? Is 25 to 29.9 kilogram per square meter. This is overweight. All right? But because of the body composition, that seems to be different when we talk about the race. Race is actually a very important factor when we talk about cardiovascular disease here. So we have to look at it. So now, in Korea, for example, not only in Korea, East Asian countries, China, Japan, you know. So overweight is 23. All right? So if you go to the medical doctor and they take your height, they take your weight, the calculation is done quickly. Being overweight here is only 23, not 25. Okay? So even though the Asian body composition, the structure of Asian people seems to be a little bit much smaller, it doesn't exclude the accumulation of fat in the body. Right? This is why it's important. We will see on the last chapter to plan really a healthy diet and making sure that we really stay away from anything that can be a factor for cardiovascular disease. All right? So that in the body composition of black people is not actually more fat, but actually more muscles than fat. All right? For example, do you know the tennis player Serena Williams? Serena Williams? She's pretty big, isn't it? If you take her to the hospital, trust me, they will tell you that her BMI is probably overweight. Right? So the BMI, the body mass index, is not always the best way to accurately measure fat in our body. Alright? It's not always the accurate way. Because this lady, she's actually full of muscles, and these muscles are heavy, so you take her weight, you take her height, and you may just think that she's overweight when she's not. All right. So race is a factor. All right. So this is simple definition of obesity. When we talk so you have this definition. You have this definition on your PPT. It's a good definition to know, but in a very simple form. You know, we've been talking about energy, and I ask you, what is the reasons? What are the causes? What are the causes of obesity? All right. What are the causes of obesity? Anybody remembers? What is the first cause of obesity?
Overeating.
So this is the one that we know, yeah? Overeating. And I think last week, yeah, we say, okay, if you eat too much, yeah, there's a great chance you're going to be obese or things like that, right? All right, I'll go back to this one. Number one, second reason why are we obese? Second reason. Oh, I only have one student in this class. Everybody else is sleeping. All right, no problem. So here, number two, lack of exercise. Okay. Number three reason. Another reason. Yeah, genetics. And we also have other reasons. Remember when we talk, for example, about diabetes, gestational diabetes. So what can be another reason? Yeah, so here we can have, for example, cases of pregnancy or medicines, right? Drugs that we use. All right? But now, I think I've told you, of course, overeating is a big factor when we're talking about obesity. Why? Because we assume that the food, right, that we eat has energy. So we put energy in the body, but because we don't exercise, the whole energy stays here, right, to some extent. But what did I say? I told you that talking about overeating, I told you that the quantity of food is not the main factor. Is not the main factor in obesity. It's not so much. I know that it's not easy to hear because a lot of people are starving themselves. Oh, I want to lose weight, and then they stop eating. Right? We said on the last chapter, you can eat enough, but that's not the problem. The problem is not necessarily how much you eat. All right? Here, for all of you in nutrition, and this is something that we need to understand, that is not necessarily the quantity of food, but it's not necessarily the quantity of food, but is what? It is what? Say that again. Frequency? Yeah, sometimes people talk about frequency, always pickling and things like that. It's not so much. I have a lot of bananas in my office and oranges, and I don't see my belly changing positions. Yeah, so what is it?
Type.
Yeah, so is the type of food. We will see that on the last chapter. Is the type of food. Is the type of food that you eat. Why do I say is the type of food that you eat? You'll probably better understand it when we'll see the last chapter on planning a healthy diet. Because if you look at the definition of obesity here, we look at the thing, we say, okay, I'm gaining weight. Why am I gaining weight? I'm gaining weight because the calories, right, which is energy I put in my body is actually more than the energy I spent. Okay? So, in planning a healthy diet, what we learn is, okay, I eat, and then, I exercise, so the energy goes out, and it's balanced. So when I talk about the type of food, it's because certain food will give you more energy than other food. Alright? You can eat as much broccoli that you want. It's not the same as my favorite cake. Try cheesecake every day and you'll see the difference, even though it's a small quantity. Yeah, trust me on that one. Alright? So, you can be eating a small muffin compared to, double amount in vegetables, in fruits and vegetables, the effect won't be the same. So it's really the type of food that we eat. So again, and we see that most of the time in high schools, for you guys who will be working in high schools and things like that, especially with young girls, I want to lose weight, and they stop eating and starving themselves. This is not the proper way. The problem is not how often they eat or how much they're eating, is what are they eating. Alright? And when we mention, for example, the African American community, remember the picture that I drew to you guys before about social economical status and health. Remember that picture we had on the exam? The relationship between social economical status and your health. Because if you're poor, what kind of food are you likely to be eating if you live in the US, for example? Yeah, you'll be eating a lot of fast food that is pretty cheap, high in calorie. Alright? So this food, cheap food usually means a lot of calorie, high calorie. And high calorie means what? A lot of energy. A lot of energy means what? I'm gaining weight. And the weight that we gain is not muscle weight. It's really like fat. And we look at the problem, for example, of insulin resistance associated with fat. Alright? So guys, have that picture in mind. Central abdominal obesity and the relationship with other diseases, including high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and some cancer. All right. Okay. So keep that in mind. Not the quantity of food, but the type of food that we are eating. Okay. So and then in terms of obesity, just I like two technical words here when we talk about hypoplasia. Please remember these words. Basically here, how obesity is starting, it starts like anything, right? It starts small. So you have the adipocytes here in numbers. When they grow in numbers, then we talk about hypoplasia. And then at one point of time, they grow in size. Alright? When they grow in size, we call it hypertrophy. Good words to understand, even if you study computer science, right? Okay guys, so everybody kind of look hungry. You know, I ate at 11:30. I'm still fine, but people look at me like it's not time for us to go eat. Okay, so let us stop today. So go through your PPT. Hopefully, we can finish this chapter on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we'll start with high blood pressure. Okay, okay?
Okay.
All right, have a nice day and enjoy your meal. Make the right choice of food.
Oh.